All right, what's going on? This is the King Cam Ujumbe Podcast and Ujumbe means message. And today's message, we're going to get into that. Today's message is priests, prophecies, and the last queen. Yeah, the tragic fate of Sobekneferu. What's going on? Greet everybody as you come in. You're now here with us. Go ahead and get ready. Get you something to write on, something to write with, get real comfortable because we're about to get into something epic today. I'm excited about this. Greet everybody as you come in, hit the like button and all the things. Get comfortable because I know we normally would do we would normally go live over the weekend, but because it's Mother's Day weekend, I didn't want to do that, and gotta respect the Queen mothers and Queen Cam and everything. So, but here we are on a Monday. Yeah, it's about to go down. So get something right on, something right with. And so we're going to talk about the tragic fate of Sobekneferu. We're about to, this is what we're about to get into today. Okay. We're about to uncover some lost stories, some Kemetic science, the sacred sciences, spiritual legacies of Africa's ancient past. So today's episode, we'll go into the veiled corridors of the power in ancient Egypt, where theology and betrayal and divine memory collide. Yeah, we're going to get into a place and space in the 12th dynasty where theology, politics, and rulership clash. So Sobekneferu was the first woman to wear, as we know, the double crown as Insubiti, right? She was a sovereign who ruled not behind the throne like everybody else, but right in front. Yeah, but her name, even some of her name is erased in some places or is forgotten in others. And some would believe that her even her soul, her spirit is cast into silence. Depends on who's doing the talking, right? This is the theory, okay, of Sobekneferu, the forgotten queen of Kemet, whose fate is sealed not just by enemies abroad, but by her own people. Yeah. So some of the priesthood believed that she was not upholding to the rules and regulations of Ma'at, and she had to be dealt with. Right. So we're gonna explore and we're gonna deal with the another priesthood called the Heliopolitan priest, the esoteric meaning of the Ennead. We're gonna get into the Ennead and the primordial Neteru. We're going to get into how spiritual betrayal one queen sent ripples through time, leading to omens of collapse. And matter of fact, Joseph, yeah, the Joseph shows up in the Fayum. Yeah, the Old Testament character, the Old Testament figure Joseph is in this story. Okay, and so just keep an open mind. We're gonna unravel some things because this is not just history. This is a message. This is gonna be fun. So greet everybody as you come in, and let's get to it. Let's get down to the business now. So today, we're gonna discuss chapters 22 to 25 of the book. Okay, the first female pharaoh, Sobekneferu, goddess of the seven stars. We're almost done with it. We got a few more episodes of this, and that's it. So we're going to talk about Joseph, the rise of the Heliopolitan priest, the Esoteric Ennead. Yeah, we're going to. I told you, you guys was asking for some Kemetic science and symbolism. Yeah, today we're going to get in. We're going to touch on that. We're going to deal with that. Spiritual assassination, the road to destruction, the fate of Sobekneferu, and a bonus. Yeah, we're gonna throw in a bonus and premonition of impending doom. Do you think, dealing with the fact that she was a priestess before all of this, do you think that she had an idea that the walls was closing in on her? What do you think? All right, and I'm checking roll it in the class. So yeah, let's get it. Now, here's a question. Did Queen Sobekneferu truly fall to political forces? Was her fate sealed by spiritual betrayal from the priesthood? Because remember, she was connected to Sobek in so many words. She was connected to that faction. Okay, there was some other priestly factions in the mix. Okay, did they feel some type of way about it? What role did the rise of the Heliopolitan priests play in the shifting of Egypt's divine order? Because there's chaos and there's order, and it got to be some balance in between that, right? And was it the beginning of a spiritual coup or takeover? Yeah, remember, she's the last pharaoh of the 12th dynasty. Was this the beginning of the end, in so to speak? All right. Now, Joseph. Yes, he does show up in the story. Okay. Joseph in the Fayum. Yeah. Andrew, and now I'm gonna give a disclaimer. I'm gonna do this real quick. All right. Listen to me. This is me and Mr. Collins, Andrew Collins, the author of the book. Before attempting to foray into Old Testament tradition, it should be made clear that it is not the purpose of this book or podcast to attempt to confirm the historical validity of characters contained in the Hebrew Bible, or indeed those of the Holy Quran, such which carry similar stories. Our interests lie principally in what medieval Arab Islamic historians said regarding to Joseph's alleged hydraulical activities in Egypt. So leave me alone. This is not theology class. This is not Bible study. Okay, this is a history class, and we just going over some information. Yeah. Miss Blue, she says, like all good kings and queens, I'm pretty sure she had her spies. She had her spies throughout the kingdom. She probably had a heads up. Yeah, she might have. Okay, she probably did have a heads up. You know, it does get interesting, but yeah, we're gonna deal with Joseph. Okay, the historical Joseph. In chapter 22, we encounter a fascinating and often overlooked character in the story of Egypt's decline, Joseph. Now, I wonder, did Joseph have anything to do with this change? We're talking about Joseph, okay, the biblical figure for his rise to the power in the Pharaoh's court. But this isn't the Joseph of Genesis, okay? This we're talking about the historical Joseph, all right? Joseph of history, okay? Here we're going to explore Joseph in the Fayum, the historical context, an intriguing historical figure whose presence may have had much deeper implications for Egyptian society and the spiritual order. Was Joseph symbolic of this change? Was he the catalyst of it all? Okay. Now, before we get into that, little review, Lost Kingdom, because since we're in the Fayum area, we talked about this. The Fayum region, located in the heart of Egypt, holds a crucial place in the historical and cultural development of ancient Kemet or Egyptian civilization. This fertile area, nourished by the Bahar Yusuf Canal, branching from the Nile, has been home to human settlements for thousands of years. Okay. Archaeological evidence suggests that early inhabitants thrived in this region due to its rich resources, which supported agriculture, fishing, and trade. Now, the earliest known human presence in the Fayum dates back to the Neolithic period around 5500 before Common Era, with the Fayum, a culture being one of the first documented farming societies. So the Fayum was the very first farming society in Kemet. Okay. These earlier settlers developed innovative and agricultural techniques that control water flow from the Nile. Now last week, if you was paying attention, we did mention a underground chamber that was probably used to take some people out, and they used that underground chamber and some water. Okay, all right, we're gonna get to that. They cultivated grains such as barley and emmer, wheat, supplemented by hunting and fishing at Lake Morris, which was was once advanced by the water. Pottery and basket weaving were also prominent crafts, in indicating a structured and self-sustaining society. Now, as Egyptian civilization advanced, the Fayum became increasingly integrated into the greater political and economic framework of Egypt. Egypt needed every part of Egypt to be involved. So in this situation, the Fayum, which was heavy in agriculture, was needed, right? So during the Old Kingdom, the region was utilized as an agricultural hub, supplying food to the central authorities, Memphis and beyond. So by the Middle Kingdom, by the time Sobekneferu came into power, they was already booming, right? So Fayum saw a rise in urbanization, which settlements expanded and expanding and trade flourishing. The region's strategic locations facilitated interactions with neighboring regions and influencing its culture and economy. Now, this is where Joseph is. Okay, the biblical account of Joseph arrives in Egypt as a foreigner. Okay, he is a foreigner. He's new. Okay, but eventually he becomes a trusted advisor and then ultimately a vizier, a noble, all right, to the Pharaoh due to his ability to interpret dreams. So in the Fayum, however, we're asked to look at him not just simply as a biblical figure, but as a real agent of transformation, a real person, okay? A potentially pivotal player in the crossroads of Egypt's spiritual and political collapse, because it's all this was happening at one time. Okay, we got to understand that the 12th dynasty had its issues, but it came to a point to where everything was collapsing and everything had to reset. So here comes Sobekneferu over here, and here comes Joseph over here. And then we have the priest over there. So all this was happening. Okay, we have to understand that history is cyclical, it's a cycle, it's not linear. All these moving parts was happening all at one time, right? So we have Joseph. Now, here it is. Joseph and the Fayum, foreign influence and the rise of bureaucracy, because we know Amenem had the random brother, stepbrother the king let in. He was cool with the Asiatic people. We already know that. We already know that he was good with these folk that came in, these foreigners coming in from farther east. Okay, so the Fayum was crucial to understanding Joseph's possible influence. This fertile region was integral to Egypt's grain storage, as we mentioned, and its central economic base. The Fayum oasis, known for its agricultural abundance, was one of Egypt's breadbaskets. So it wasn't just a political place or economic place, but it had a spiritual focus. Because we talked about Sobek of Shedet, right? And so that place, the Fayum region, is connected to Sobek, the crocodile Neteru. Okay, and so it represented both fertility and force. Okay, you got to be good and about that life at the same time, fertility and power. So could Joseph, by gaining control of this region, by gaining control over grain distribution during the time of famine, have shifted not just Egypt's economy, but its spiritual fabric? All these things go into play. Somebody's, hey, what's going on, Soul Zenith? What's going on? Hey, greet everybody to come in. We're about to get in. You came just in time for this conversation. So the question is, what do you think? Okay, by him showing up, do you think there was a shift in not just the political, the economic, but the spiritual? Because there's some new priests that show up that may have been in the background, but they waited they just basically waited right here, right now to deal with this. What do you think? Do you think that Joseph has something to do with shifting the spiritual fabric? All right. Now here it is. Some scholars would suggest that Joseph's policies brought with them a shift towards centralized control, undermining the older decentralized system of priestly power. So we have these new cats coming in here with these new ideas, kind of sliding the old school. The new school's coming in, the old school is feeling some type of way about it. Yeah, we're gonna see that a little bit later on too. There is a shift, because remember, the priest of Amun is still there. All right, and the priest of Ptah, they're not gonna bother people too much, but it's the Amun priesthood that was really serious about that. Okay, so we have Joseph's influence may have strengthened Egypt's bureaucracy, establishing economic practices and governance structures that rely less on divine guidance and more on human administration. You can't just pray about this thing. You got to actually go and work. Yeah, some of these folks didn't like that. Some of these folks didn't like that. This foreign policy, this new idea. I don't know about that, right? So his introduction into the Fayum region is symbolic for sure. Okay, Joseph, we talking about the historical and possibly the biblical character Joseph in the 12th dynasty. I can't confirm for sure, don't know for sure. You understand? So again, we're just talking about some historical facts. Okay, Joseph's introduction into the Fayum region is symbolic. A foreign outsider embedded in the heart of Egypt's sacred land, right there, changing the flow of power and the sacred order. His influence over grain, over survival, may have marked the beginning of Egypt's spiritual and economic vulnerability. Egypt was basically weaker than they thought they were. Mm-hmm. That was something going on, right? There was some issues there. So get this. One of the most important medieval Arab works, we're talking about historically, featuring Joseph's alleged activities in the Fayum, is the book called the Kitab al-Ajib al-Kabir. Kitab al-Ajib al-Kabir, the Great Book of Marvels. Okay? It's called the Great Book of Marvels. All right? So it is attributed to the noted scholar Ibrahim ibn Wasif Sa. Ibrahim ibn Wasif Sa, he wrote the book, known also as Al-Wasifi, who thrived no later than 1200 Common Era. Now, the book text apparently derived from earlier source material talks about Joseph's time in Egypt. This being after he was successfully interpreted prophetic dreams experienced by the ruling monarch concerning the imminent 7-year drought that would otherwise have plunged the country into famine. So this guy in the medieval period wrote something about Joseph interpreting these dreams. Yeah, he talked about that. All right. Now, so here we have Joseph's prophetic influence. Okay, because by him coming in here, it introduced a different sort of spirituality, a different sort of power that basically unraveled some of the old ways of Kemet. What do you think? We'll see, right? Now, Joseph's story is steeped in dream interpretation in which divine guidance and prophetic visions play a central role. Could it be that his presence in the Fayum wasn't only securing grain supplies, but also interpreting the dream of Egypt's fate overall? Could he have been there to address the overall story of Egypt? Yeah, could this be where Sobekneferu's downfall began? By him telling this story about this drought, because we know she wasn't in power that long, and she was in power during a time of a drought. Do you think this was her story also? This was her fate also? Yeah. So the presence of Joseph in the Fayum may have been seen as a sign. Yeah. May have been seen as a sign in the Fayum. In the Fayum may have been shifted. Okay. Not just economic salvation, but of a spiritual salvation, drawing attention to divine omens of a kingdom at a crossroad. This is the 12th dynasty, and after the 12th dynasty, here come these foreigners. As his reputation for interpreting dreams spread, he may have had influence in the Heliopolitan priests. Them priests they've been there, but they weren't active like that. Right? So these guys were deeply attuned to the celestial phenomena and the mystical meaning behind them. So these guys they were praying, they were doing things, but they weren't active. But I think Joseph and his dream interpretations kind of sparked some ideas with this group. Okay. Now, Joseph's connection to divine foresight, his connection with divine foresight could have added to the growing unease about Egypt's future. They wasn't certain. They wasn't sure. Okay. So, and it heightened the tension between the emerging Heliopolitan priesthood and the older tradition. I told you the older cats wasn't, they didn't trust this guy, and they didn't trust them new priests over there either. Yeah, so in the end, Joseph's time in the Fayum could have marked the beginning of a shift from spiritual guidance to political pragmatism, laying the groundwork for later spiritual destruction that Sobekneferu would face. Yeah, this thing, it gets heavy. Okay, let me see. What's going on, Brother Ferguson? What's going on? I think she was disposed of due to religious tension. Oh, man. All right, so somebody think. What do you think? Let's go and do it. Let's go and do it. We're gonna deal with this. Do you think that Sobekneferu, even though she was born into this, even though she got initiated and all this thing, do you think once they were done with Amenemhat the Fourth, do you think they dealt with her? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of movement going on. A lot of people moving different around here. Yeah. What do y'all think? Because this is during the time where there's a lot of exchanging is happening, and a lot of movement is happening, a lot of transitioning is happening. You're going from, say, the great king Amenemhat III, who reigned for decades, to the stepson who let these foreigners in, to the sister. Yeah, because the reality is the drought did happen. It did happen. Yeah. So Joseph's interpretation was on. Something was going to happen. So could this be in a situation where Sobekneferu's downfall began because of that drought? When, say, divine was exchanged for bureaucracy, or when the priests of the old ways lost their power? Yeah. Yeah. Or was it when the sacred was exchanged for secular? Y'all let me know. What do y'all think? Because Joseph showing up on the scene, it changed. It was I think it was an omen. I think it was by him touching down in Kemet. It changed a lot of things. So now we have here the account was given in the, I gotta read this, in the Katab al Ajab al Kabir. He picks a biblical narrative after the Pharaoh in question, named, who was the Pharaoh? Naharash. Narash. Now, according to this story, he reigned 120 years. Okay, at which time we are told Joseph created the Fayum. Okay, the author speaks of how the Egyptians saw the king was growing too old to rule, and so his intelligence was fading, and the king is put to the test, something that Joseph is asked to do on his behalf. Now, according to Collins, Menem or Alamani is the name given to the principle of the canals in the Fayum region. Now, the name itself is very possible is the corruption of the ancient Egyptian term mirror, which refers to both a town of its name and the lake Morris and the Bar Yusuf or the waterway of Joseph. So we have the king, the old king, being put to the test, and Joseph is standing in for him, and they're at this place called Mirror, right? Now, Laun is mentioned also in chapter 5. He marks the site of the 12th dynasty town in Necropolis that included the pyramid complex known as Rehom. It is located in the western edge of the Nile Valley, close to where Bar Yusuf enters the Fayum Depression through the Harawa Canal. So before we get to it, let me see what the book say, because I know, see, the book got something to say about it. Let me see. Now, thereafter, the narrates Joseph embarked on various engineering projects. Okay. Once the king was called, once he was called to the test, they charged Joseph to do these engineering projects whereby he managed to remove the waters, had the mud removed, dug the Menahem or Mene, okay, and built Alahun, okay, which is, as we mentioned earlier, the Alahun, what is that? I'm trying to get the word. I just said, oh, there it is. They say Alahum or Rehum, Rehone. So basically, this is a reference. This story is a reference to Egypt's Fayum depression prior to it being transformed into the fertile oasis. So they're saying the medieval scribe, the people that are writing these stories, are implying that Joseph has something to do with this construction site. Okay, that the Fayum was fully developed after him. Okay, that they're saying that this Arab Islamic account preserves some memory of the hydraulical projects undertaken by one or more of the kings of the 12th dynasty. So if you like the content so far, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything, because we're about to go further in this. Now, who was the king named? Who was he? Okay, that is the major question. Now, we know what they called him, Naharash. Was he Amenemhat the third? Yeah. We know that this was happening by the Sensoret the second, his complex. So was this Amenemhat the third? Okay, speaking of that, Sensoret pyramid and that the complex. So if you guys want me to break that down, let me know. Because we have not just the Islamic side of it, we have Christian Coptic. The Christian Coptic Church actually talked about the same story, not from a biblical standpoint, but from a historical standpoint. That's what makes it interesting. It's multiple people saying that this guy named Joseph changed the canals and tributaries and all that to make agriculture happen in the Fayum. Okay. Now, archaeologist Claire J. Mellison says that some of the story clearly derives from earlier Coptic Christian sources. Okay. She points out that the 10th century Common Era Arab work titled Akbar al-Zaman, okay, Chronicles of Time, that's the book, Chronicles of Time. It states that the Coptic name of the king ruled during the time of during the life of Joseph was Niraus. Niraus is a variation of Narash. Okay, Niraus. Now, the Coptic Church initially, but their stance is a little different. Okay, initially the king objects to remonstrances of his subjects, and they're the matter of the test. So after 2 years, the king finally decides to put Joseph to the test. Okay, his challenge would involve a place known as Alphium, 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 Alphium. Okay, a close approximation of the Coptic name for the Fayum. Okay, so which is Phiom is Fayum or Fayum, right? In Coptic. So for those who are studying Coptic language, yes, it is Coptic language is the closest language to say the Meta Nature. Okay, it's phonically very similar. It adds vowels, but there's a lot of things that are the same. Okay, so this in turn comes from the ancient Egyptian word Payum, meaning the sea or lake. This is referred to Lake Moeris or Lake Morris. Okay, the Egyptian word Yum is the equivalent to the Hebrew word Yam. Okay, hold on. Now, the Egyptian word Yom, Y-M, okay, is equivalent to the Hebrew word Yam, which also means sea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is what they're saying. Okay, so these guys were already giving an indication that this is the Coptic Church. They're giving an indication that Israel and Kemet had some close interactions during this time period because some of the terminology was matching. Okay. Now, but now keep speaking of that. Yeah, we got a new series coming up. We're not going to do that this summer. Ethiopia, the pillar of African civilization. We'll do that this fall. Okay. But yeah, it's amazing how some of these terms, these root words, are starting to match up. Okay. And it all happened around, and everybody's pointing towards the same person, and that's Joseph. Okay. And think about it like this. What would the world say about you? Okay. When, have you been in a situation where everything was one way and as soon as you got there, you changed it for the better? Okay. Have there been stories like that about you? I think so. I think the fam, a lot of you guys are very, very uplifting, good people. So I think that you guys, wherever you guys go, anywhere, it changes. The whole atmosphere changes, right? All right, now let's get it. Now, the story of the three channels. So the king, named only as the Rajan, commands Joseph to cause the three channels to be made. Okay, here's the story. One channel coming out of High Egypt, okay, in such a place, to that place in the Eastern Channel, such a place in the Western Channel. So, according to the Coptic Church, it says Yusuf got men together to carry on this work and cause the channel of Mani, okay, which is mentioned in the Arab Islamic story, which can be identified as the Bar Yusuf, to be digged from the upper part of the Asamonim to Lahon or Lehon or Lahun, depends on who's talking, which he caused along to be digged afterward. Then he caused the channel of Al-Fayum, or the Fayum, right, to be digged. That done, he got the laborers to cut all the reeds and tamarisk, and that was all the reeds and wood that was in it, and carried away. Then the Nile began to flow into it. And it became pure, and the Giona became pure and clean ground. Once again, according to Collins, this account seems to describe the hydraulical works undertaken in the Fayum by one or more 12 dynasty pharaohs. This includes the clearing of the Bar Yusuf waterway from entrance to the El Lahun through the entire length of the Hara Canal. So they're basically saying that this channel work was done consistently, and Joseph did have a hand in it. He did have a hand in it. Okay, the same feats of engineering came to be accredited to Joseph, who was a Hebrew slave, who in the Hebrew Bible is said to have become ruler of all the land of Egypt. The Semitic speaking people were present in the Fayum at the time. Okay, so the Hyksos and all the foreigners were there, and they engaged in monumental engineering programs under the command of the reigning king, which is not in question. Okay, so that they're really believing that it was Amenemhat III. Yep. So who was the king during this time? According to some scholars, I don't know for sure. Look at me. I do not know for sure. But according to some scholars, Joseph, okay, the biblical character of Joseph was alive during the time of Amenemhat III. This is what they're saying. Okay. What do y'all think? All right. We got Amenemhat in the mix. Of course, he would not have supervised all these projects himself. He would have had a vizier, and he would have had somebody. So in this situation, it would have been Joseph. Yep. It would have been Joseph. So he changed a lot. He changed a lot of things, and he brought in a lot of he continued some tradition, but he also brought in some new ones. Now, controlling the Nile floods. Now, that was the challenge. Okay. If you're going to be a vizier, and if you're going to deal with the engineering work, these high floods would appear to have been a major problem during the reign of Amenemhat III. So Harvard Egyptologist Barbara Bell has made a detailed study of the high water levels of the Nile, as was recorded on the cliffs above the Middle Kingdom fortress of Simna, okay, close to the Second Cataract on the border with the Nubia. And this is a illustration of what it may have looked like during the time. So flooding was an issue, and Amenemhat III had to deal with that. All right, so he called in Joseph to control that. There's no mention in the Hebrew Bible of Joseph being responsible for major engineering projects, though. Okay, they just say he was a vizier. He was, he was a ruler, right? All he does is stock the granary full of grain. That's according to the good book. Okay, that's all he does. He had nothing to do with the water. Okay, but so all he did was store it during the 7 years of plenty, and then hand it out during the 7 years of famine. These high floods would appear to have been a major problem during the rain. So during this rain, so Joseph, I believe he became that symbolic figure. He became that symbol. Okay. He became the symbol of the Nile Delta for the Western Asiatic people, but he also became a symbol of incoming change according to the Kemetic people. Yeah. So he was singled out in both Coptic and Islamic traditions, having been involved in these engineering projects. So a lot of people tied him to the Fayum, tied him to that area. Okay, Egyptologist David Roll, in his own study, Joseph's presence in Egypt during the reign of Amenemhat III, he makes it clear, however, that Joseph was not only the vizier to the king, but he also retained the same position as during the reign of Amenemhat IV. So basically, Joseph, they're saying, y'all, they're saying that Joseph was alive during this time of Amenemhat III and the fourth. And might have gone on to be vizier to the first two kings of the 13th dynasty. So this dude here, he was in there for a minute. Yeah. Like and comment below. Do you think Joseph, biblical Joseph, was alive during the time of the 12th to 13th dynasty? Okay, what do you think? Now, so we got the Joseph of the Fayum. Now we got to it's about to get interesting. The rise of the Heliopolitan priest, the road to destruction. We're going to talk about the fate of Sobekneferu, the Esoteric Ennead. Y'all asked about Kemetic science. Get ready. We're about to get into that today. Spiritual assassination and impending doom. Because some people feel that Sobekneferu either was told that something was going to happen to her, or did she have a vision about it? Because she was a priestess. All right, let's go. The rise of the Heliopolitan priest. Here we go. These are the new guys. Okay, these are the new people. The priests of Amun have always been there. The priests of Osiris have always been there. But who are these people over here? The Heliopolitan priests. Okay, but before we get into that, we're going to do a review. You know, I had to get one. Now, based on the video, Who Was King Tut's Real Mom? The DNA Mystery, who was the real mother of King Tut? Okay, was it Queen Tai, Nefertiti, the younger lady, or Kaya? The answer is genetically the younger lady. If you got it correct, like and comment, because you got an A for the day. You got an A for the day. So if you got it correct, because some people, I don't think they understand that Queen Tai was King Tut's grandmother. And so a lot of people was picking Queen Tai, like, bro, no, that's not it, right? Because remember that she was the grandmother. And now the reason why Nefertiti wasn't, some scholars believe that she assumed the role under Neferu Aten, potentially ruling as a female pharaoh before vanishing from historical record. If by chance she had been King Tut's mama, her legacy would likely have continued through his reign, but instead, her connection to him is absent, in official records. So that's the reason why Nefertiti was not ruled or not written or recognized as King Tut's mama. Because once he came into power, you didn't hear nothing about her no more. So, like I said before, Nefertiti wasn't his mother. So we're going to talk about that. The vanishing queen. We're going to talk about that because Queen Mother, we're going to talk about the vanishing queen, Nefertiti, and the battle for Egypt's soul. Mama Louise made a humble request. She said, look, can we go into more detail about Queen Nefertiti? We sure will. We sure will. We're gonna get into that because there was some tension. There was some issues between Queen Mother Tai and this new Queen Nefertiti. So y'all think Sobekneferu and them people was different? It got really difficult in the 18th dynasty. It got real different. We talking about the Queen Mother, the old guard here again versus the new. And she may have been a foreigner. Yeah, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna talk about that coming up. So don't forget to subscribe button so you don't miss out. Now, the real queen, the real mother of King Tut, based on DNA, her DNA matched with King Tut. It's called, her name was the younger lady. They didn't know for sure. And autosomal DNA confirmed her as both sister to Akhenaten and the mother of King Tut. King Tut, providing the most direct evidence of her matrilineal lineage to date. This groundbreaking genetic work also shed light to the royal inbreeding and its health repercussions. A lot of people would like to say that, but they would like to they'll say inbreeding. Of course, there was one moment in time, but the majority of the pharaohs and queens, they were not directly related. They was part of a royal family or nobility, but they weren't brother and sister. Because we just found out that Amenemhat IV was not related to Sobekneferu or Neferu Ptah. Okay, that was the king. That was the king's. The king just brought him in and adopted him. Right, and get this though. This is the thing. The younger lady, she was buried with Queen Tai and not Nefertiti. And you know, according to custom, according to Kemetic custom, a random person is not going to be buried in the Valley of the Kings like that. They're not going to just put them there with them. Right? Now, the rise of the Heliopolitan priests. All right. So, the connection with the Neteru, or Neter Ra, is revealing since Potiphar. Remember the biblical character Potiphar. Recall later in the story under the slightly altered name Potipharah. Potipharah in Genesis chapter 41, verse 45, meaning he who Ra gave or has given. Potipharah. So this is said to have been the priest, a priest of On or Inu, the priest of On or On, the Hebrew name for Heliopolis. So Potiphar or Potipharah was a priest or connected with the priesthood of Heliopolis. Joseph was a slave to Potiphar. Potiphar was connected to that priestly group. Okay. Now, with Amenemhat IV patronage to Heliopolis and his active connection with Atum, maybe the priests of Ra felt they would have also be influential in affairs of Egypt again. They felt like because of this new king, this new guy, Amenemhat IV, everything was going to be well. They was going to get their power back. They was going to get their situation back, and it'd be all good. But something happened to Amenemhat IV. Something happened to him. Okay, so now this in chapter 3 brings us to the heart of the transformation, right? The rise of the Heliopolitan priesthood. Heliopolis was the city of the sun, was a home of the cult of Ra, and the doctrine of the divine creation through Atum, which is also known as self-begotten. We're about to get into Kemetic science. Here we go. All right. This theology was remarkably different from Hermopolitan and Theban systems that had traditionally supported the balance of Ma'at, which is truth, order, and cosmic harmony. So the people of Heliopolis was on one side, and then the people of Waset and Hermopolitan, they were on another side. And Sobekneferu was in the cut, right? As the Heliopolitan priests gained influence, they began to rewrite cosmology. They went in there, I told you, they went in there and started rewriting on sacred text. They start rewriting things, placing the sun god Ra above all other deities, because at one time they was all connected together. This was not a religious evolution. This was a spiritual takeover. The people of Heliopolis felt like, okay, since Amenemhat is in the mix, since he's already in power, okay, since he's doing this, we're gonna do what we want. And we got Joseph over here. Yeah, we're gonna start rewriting some stuff. What them books say? We're gonna rewrite. We're gonna make our own book. We're gonna make our own thing and make our own ideas. And because Joseph, he's a dreamer, so he's gonna co-sign. And then Potiphar, he's cool with it. Yeah, and we don't know for sure where Sobekneferu. I heard she's from Sobek, so she really don't count. So they rewrote everything. A spiritual takeover. I told you this was not just a political thing or economic thing. This started becoming a spiritual thing. Under Sobekneferu, a woman who had inherited the rule from a sacred bloodline tied to the crocodile Nitaru and the primal waters, the Heliopolitan doctrine posed a threat. Yeah. They rewrote this stuff, but then here come this sister here. She was raised different. Her allegiance is different, and she posed a threat. Amenemhat IV is gone. Why? Because we don't know what happened to him. But what we do know is that Sobekneferu is now in his place, and she's not siding with us. Brother Ferguson really believes that somebody or a group or organization decided to take her out. It was fire overtaking water, sun overpowering the hidden stars, patriarchal theologies supplanting the cosmic feminine, and therefore Kemet was in isfet, or out of balance. When you start rewriting things, when you start neglecting the ancestors and all these things, you start getting out of balance, right? So the priests aligned themselves with political factions who no longer saw divinity in the female body, nor legitimacy in the female rule. They didn't like that. They didn't like what was going on. In their doctrine, the queen became an anomaly. So in their view, this random queen, even though she was born here, she was born into power and all these things, she became a threat. That's what happened. So Sobekneferu, to these priests and these other guys that was trying to get over, she posed a threat. Yeah. She became a disruption. She became an obstacle. Yeah. I told you we about to get involved, because she did not like all these foreign people taking over and occupying all these sacred spaces. She wasn't for that. The other king he was cool with it. He's gone. So now Sobekneferu had to handle it. So according to the Heliopolitan priest, Sobekneferu became a problem. Yep. So the spiritual and political rise of the Heliopolitan priesthood, to understand the gravity, we got to understand. To understand, it's not, y'all. It's not just. Let me remove this real quick. This is not just people, right? These are age-old factions and forces in play. Okay, you guys. I wish you guys could understand. Okay, these groups have been in place in Kemet up at this point from the Old Kingdom or pre-dynastic period, an estimated 2,500 years already. It was already rolling. So here come Sobekneferu changing everything. They didn't like that. They didn't like that idea. Okay. And it was messing with their money. Messing with their pocket. Okay. But let's explain why. Why is it a problem? Why is it a issue? Because it's a major shift. It's a major change, right? Heliopolis, known in ancient times as Inu or On, the pillar of the sun, was of the oldest and most sacred religious centers in all of Egypt, in all of Kemet. This is according to scholars. So long before Waset or Thebes rose to prominence, Heliopolis was a home to the priesthood that guarded the most abstract and metaphysical creation theology, the Ennead. Let's get to it. Kemetic science loaded. Here we go. A family of 9 primordial Neteru, beginning with Atun, who emerged from the chaotic waters of Nun and birthed the Neteru through self-generation, through his own power. In this cosmology, Atun Ra was the source of all, not just the sun in the sky, but the spiritual force of creation itself, the seen and unseen, right? Now, speaking of Ennead, speaking of the Ennead, the Esoteric Ennead, solar code, and cosmic gatekeeping, we about to lean further into the Ennead, but I want you guys to understand that these stories, these journeys are ages old. All right. So the priests, okay, we're gonna get to that. So the priests of Heliopolis developed an elite metaphysical and practical system. It emphasized chaos, order, light, darkness, life, and death, all these things, and the principle of Ma'at. So over time, this doctrine gained not only spiritual authority, but immense political influence. And remember, get this, these priests were not just temple functionaries. We talked about priesthoods and all that before. Many were trained in the liberal arts and sciences. Many were trained in astronomy. They were scribes, theologians, and royal advisors. So they had a lot of pull, and they was in a lot of places. So many were trained from childhood, born into hereditary priestly lines, schooled in the meta nature. They knew the book of coming forth by day, backwards and forwards. They knew the coffin text, the pyramid text, the Fayum text. Okay, and so this was like second nature to them. But here's where it becomes complex. Here's where it becomes difficult, right? The issue is, while the Heliopolitan priesthood preserved profound and spiritual and sacred science, including detailed knowledge of the solar system, the solar cycles, cosmic harmonies, and architecture of divine order, they also became the gatekeepers. Yeah. Their knowledge placed the sun god, or the Neteru Ra, at the top of everything instead of it being an even balance. Okay, it became a hierarchy instead of a circular system. This hierarchy conveniently aligned with the Pharaonic rule, as long as the ruler was going along with what they want to do. So here we go. Here comes Sobekneferu, right? A woman, a sister on the throne who was already an anomaly, right? She broke the matrix already. A woman invoking the ancient goddesses, okay, the ancient ancestors. She sent. That's what she relied. That's what she rested on. She rested on the older traditions, the older ways, right? And so these traditions were before the Heliopolitan group, the Heliopolitan past. So this was a feminine cosmology. Okay, this was rooted in stars, water, and the crocodile god, the crocodile Neteru Sobek. So this was far more than an anomaly. She was a challenge. She was a problem. So Sobekneferu, she presented herself, represented a different idea, different strand of Kemetic spirituality, one linked with the primal waters to the noon and to the divine feminine as cosmic womb and regulator of time. Her association with the seven stars, we're going to talk about that. Her association with the seven stars, referencing the Pleiades or the seven Hathors. I did not know. Did you know? Did y'all know? Because you guys are really smart. Did you know that there was seven Heteru? There was seven Hathors. Because remember, okay, a segment was a variant of Heteru. So there's seven. Wow. So Sobekneferu was a direct call to the pre-solar stellar-based tradition that saw the stars as the source of divine cycles, not the sun alone. Because a lot of the older monuments, was lined up with the stars and not the sun and the moon. Okay. Now, the Heliopolitan priests would have seen this as heresy. But it's funny, whenever the priest didn't like anything, they call you a heretic. So, or worse, it was a return to a dangerous instability, something that that instability was a thing that they couldn't control. That's what it meant. They couldn't control it. So Sobekneferu couldn't be controlled, and certainly not the primordial Neteru or the ancient ancestors. They certainly couldn't be controlled, right? So let me repeat it. Sobekneferu's association with the old ways, the seven stars, likely referencing Pleiades or the seven Neteru. Once again, did you know about that? Because this is in the book. It's in the last chapter, the goddess of the seven stars. It is in the last chapter. Yeah, we're gonna get into that. All right, hit the like button. We're gonna talk about that. But because we're gonna talk about that fall from grace. Did she get to a point to where being here, it really didn't matter to her anymore? All right, let's go. So, as I said earlier, Sobekneferu represented a different strand of Kemetic spirituality, right? One linked to the primal waters, the primordial waters, to the noon, and to the divine feminine, the cosmic womb, and regulator of time. Her association with the seven stars, seven Hathors. This was like I said many times, like I said before, this is a direct call to the pre-solar and stellar traditions that saw the stars as a source of divine cycles and not the sun alone. Okay, so they saw her as a heretic. Okay, so what did they do? What did they do? The priests of Heliopolis, they began consolidating their power. Okay, they started to combine forces. Yeah, the record suggests that during and shortly after Sobekneferu's reign, temples aligned with Ra or Atun gained unprecedented endowments. So the funding started going back to those temples. The books was rewritten, okay, and those hymns to Ra and all those Neteru became dominant in court liturgy. And in the years that followed under the 13th dynasty and later during the rise of Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep, the sun cult would reach nearly absolute supremacy. So the idea of the Aten came from somewhere, and I believe it came from the priests of Heliopolis. So Sobekneferu's entire reign was a defiance of the priesthood's narrative. Okay, Sobekneferu was totally different. She didn't care about none of that. She cared about Kemet as a nation, right? She ruled through the power of Sobek, the crocodile Neteru, and tied to the primal waters and not the sun. She invoked the seven stars, likely referencing to the pre-dynastic stellar priesthoods and celestial Neteru like Sheshat. Okay, Sheshat and the seven Heteru outside of Ra, outside of Atun. And she crowned herself, or she was crowned in Sutbiti, right? So how did they respond? Okay, they had what you call a silent takeover. Yeah. Sobekneferu already had the army. She already had the military. So the priests had to move different. Okay. They didn't need armies. They had tools of erasure. They had the ink, they had papyrus, they had the scrolls, and even oral transmission. So they tried to paper Sobekneferu out. Yeah. Or also the likely method of her removal was ritual archival. Her monuments were left incomplete. We've seen the statue. Okay, defaced or repurposed by later kings. So in official theology, her reign became a problem to be corrected by the divine will or a brief misalignment in Ma'at. So what they were saying, that if the priest had something to say about it, Sobekneferu was a mistake and she should not have been in power. So we're going to do a silent takeover, a spiritual assassination, and eventually be historical amnesia, even though she by right is the queen and king of Egypt. So in this way, Sobekneferu fall was less than a political collapse and more of a spiritual excommunication. Basically, she was stripped of divine legitimacy. In the eyes of the new priesthood, her mythos dissolved. Her soul, according to their theology, may not have even been allowed passage through the Duat, the underworld, unless she had secured protection through older and hidden rites, right? So we have the labyrinth. She had to take that journey. I believe that the labyrinth was a external manifestation of what she was going through on the inside, because she was the builder of the labyrinth. All right. So, and I think that she was guilty by association. She was guilty because she went with the old ways and not try to run with whatever everybody else was doing. But as a ruler, that's what you got to do. You got to make your own mind. You got to do your own thing. Okay. Everybody may or may not agree with you. Okay. So in this way, this was a spiritual communication. Like I said, her soul, according to their theology, may not have been allowed passage through the Duat. In other words, this is according to them. But now, unless she secured protection through older hidden rights. Now, we already discussed the fact that Heteru did get involved. Okay, so I don't think at this point it really mattered what the Heliopolitan priesthood was going to do or say. So Sobekneferu was already set. She was already ready to go to that next path or that next level, right? So do you think she saw this coming? Do you think she saw this coming? Like and comment below. Do you think she saw change coming? Do you think that she became aware of this, right? So some oral tradition and speculative sources suggesting Sobekneferu received premonitions of betrayal, possibly through dreams or seers or even stellar alignments, because she was a priestess before she was king, right? I'm sure she performed obscure rituals near the end of her life, offerings to the seven stars and Netzeru, disappearances from the capital, and pilgrimage to the temples wasn't working anymore. Okay, so I think she started to see that the Chamber of Ashes was going to have to be her last resort. I think so. So could she have attempted to preserve her spiritual essence in another form? What do you think? Okay. Do you think she tried to describe her being in the stars instead of stone? Because remember, she was connected to stellar and celestial ancestors of Netzeru, older ancestors. By that time, according to the pyramid text, by that time they became the imperishable stars. So do you think that she was trying to do that also? Instead of dealing with stones, she was becoming a star. Okay. She wants to leave behind a mystery and not a monument. So I think that was her ultimate path. She wanted to become an imperishable star, right? So so she may have succeeded. Okay, I think she may have did that, for through her body, even though her body was lost, her story continues, right? But get this, the roots of that rise again here. So with the quiet calculated displacement of Sobekneferu's legitimacy by the increasingly powerful sun priest of Inu. Her theology may have worn the robes of cosmic truth, but in practice, she may have. A lot of these guys was preaching and talking about it, but she was actually doing that, right? So this left no place for. They didn't like that. They didn't like that. So when we speak of Sobekneferu's fate, we are not only speaking of a monarch losing her throne, we are witnessing a spiritual restructuring of civilization. Okay, orchestrated by a priesthood whose influence would shape Egypt for centuries to come. So Sobekneferu was that last, I think, the last guard in the sense of the old order. I think so. Speaking of that, here we go. Here we go. The Esoteric Ennead, Solar Code, and Cosmic Gatekeeping. Yeah, we about to get into this conversation. You guys asked about Kemetic science and everything. Make sure you get your pen and paper, and I hope you got it ready. So, at the core of the Heliopolitan theology lies the Ennead. There's 9 primordial Neteru whose symbolic relationships form the cosmic architecture of ancient Egypt's worldview. So before we get into that, though, got a question. Before we get to that, teleportation or time travel? Teleportation or time travel? Like and comment below. Teleportation or time travel? Like and comment below. Now let me know. Okay. All right. Now, here it is. I hope you got the stuff together. I hope you got something to write. People ask for, here it is. The Esoteric Ennead, Solar Code, and Cosmic Gatekeeping. At the core, like I said before, at the core of Heliopolitan theology lies the Ennead, the 9 primordial intelligences, the ancestors or Neteru, whose archetypical interplay encoded the metaphysical DNA of Kemetic sacred science. For more than divine genealogy, the Ennead was a cosmic vibrational formula through which the ancients mapped the descent of spirit into matter and return through initiation. Again, this was not just a formula. This was a map, a breakdown to show how the spirit goes into matter and returns from matter back to the spirit through what? Through initiation. Okay. Now we have a tune. Okay. We have a tune. The self-created one, born from the primordial waters of Nun, initiating creation through thought and a word, the self-begotten monad, emerging from the Nun, the abyss of infinite potential. He is undivided point. He's the undivided point, pure will and intention. Right, his creation of Shu and Tefnut by spitting or sneezing was not a mere act of generation, but a release of a word or a seed of consciousness into polarity. This archetype of divine energy before separation. Now, the divine sequence begins from the divine sequence or separation begins from Nun to Atun in the coffin text. In the coffin text, it says this: I am Atun when I was alone in Nun. I am Ra when he comes into being. That's coffin text number 714. Atun is the first name in the Ennead. He's not personified as a god in the beginning, but an abstract force. He's the Zep Tepi, the first occasion or the beginning before the beginning began. Pure consciousness emerging from the Nun, the infinite primordial waters. Nun represents the quantum field of unstructured potential, the void from which all existence arises. Atun does not create through tools or hands. He creates by spitting or sneezing or speaking. That's why your words have power. That's why the things you say are important. That's why it's important that we pay attention to what we say and do to people, right? Now, the language and breath, the first manifestation is duality, and that is Shu and Tefnut. Shu means air, and Tefnut means moisture. his twin offsprings establishing the duality of breath and flow. The duality of breath and flow. The first breath of and sacred fluid together, they symbolize the unity, and they complement each other. They complement each other through motion, spirit, and soul, and sky, and breath, essence, and emotion. In esoteric anatomy, they correspond to the inhale and exhale of the cosmic breath, the prana and the bindu, or the bindu, or the life force and divine essence. Shu, the Neteru of the air, breath, spirit, and life force. Tefnut, the Neteru, the goddess of moisture, tears, fluidity, and the soul. Their creation marks the first split between masculine and feminine currents. Okay. In the sacred space in between. Okay. In the pyramid text, number 600, it said, I gave birth to myself together with Shu and Tefnut. I joined my body with my shadow. That's in the pyramid text. The Ennead begins with one thought and one power. It speaks of, it talks about self-generation and light and darkness. A tune creates not out of power, but through union with this Ka and this Ba. All right, let's go. Now, Geb and Nut. Geb is the earth and Nut is the sky, right? Geb and Nut. Celestial mechanics and the womb of the stars, okay? They are the separated lovers forming the terrestrial and celestial spheres. Once united in primal embrace, now separated by Shu, who upholds the space between them. Nut is the celestial dome, the womb of the stars, the keeper of ancestral gates. Geb is the receptacle, the alchemical retort in which transformation unfolds. Their children were born not just biologically, but cosmically. Okay, so it's not just biological, but cosmic. Okay, as a manifest of their inner state. So from the union of Shu and Tefnut came Geb and Nut, earth and sky, originally united in sacred embrace. They were torn apart by Shu, by breath, by wind, who lifts Nut above him from the heavens. This separation wasn't punishment. It is necessity for manifestation. Creation requires boundaries. You hear what I said? Creation requires boundaries. It does happen. Sometimes you got to, in order for you to do your best work, sometimes you got to get away from people, right? Nut becomes the celestial vault, her body arced over the world, her womb holding the constellations, all 12 constellations, right? Every evening she swallows the sun. Now, in the book of Coming Forth by Day, it says every dawn she bursts it anew. Okay, Nut, according to the book of Coming Forth by Day, Nut gives birth to Ra each morning, who receives him in her body each evening. Okay, Nut is the cosmic mother. Her body is the zodiac, right? Geb beneath her becomes the material plane. So we have the vertical axis, the spirit above and the matter below. Okay, as above, so below, right? Between them is humanity. So then we have, of course, this is the illustration. This is the illustration of the, believe it or not, this is, of course, the weighing of the scales. And there's the Ennead at the very top right here. Okay, the Ennead is at the very top. Okay, and we have Tahuti. Okay, we have Anupu, and we have the person's heart and the feather. All right, his heart is being weighed. Right. So we have Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, the divine archetypes of life, death, magic, conflict, and hidden wisdom. These four, okay, complete the Ennead and represent sacred quadrature. Okay, life and death, and order and chaos, wisdom and mystery, seen and unseen. Osiris is the vegetative king, the dying and raising principle. Aset is the living Heka or magic, embodying devotion and Neteret of divine memory. Set, even though Set is misunderstood, he's misunderstood. He holds the key of disruption because that's necessary. Chaos is sometimes necessary. Okay, he's a necessary instigator of spiritual trials. Nephthys is the priestess of twilight, the guardian of threshold states, hidden processes, and nocturnal mysteries. Okay, let me break this down. According to ancient tradition, from Geb and Nut are born four powers, right? Okay, but not just deities or Neteru, right? They was forces within the initiate, within the person, those who are seeking knowledge. Every aspect or every element that's represented is seen in the heart and mind of somebody who's seeking knowledge. Okay. Osiris is seen as the green one, the divine king, a symbol of resurrection and spiritual rulership. He is the inner power, right? The part of the soul that dies and is reborn, right? That resilience, that rejuvenation, right? Aset, the throne and the intuitive mind, the mistress of magic. She remembers the dismembered parts of spirit and brings them into wholeness again. Okay. Set, the storm and chaos, but also the strength to overcome adversity. That's why whenever you see a king, he's situated between Heru and Set. Okay. Nephthys, the veil, the hidden guide. She governs the liminal spaces, twilight, transition, dream, and death. And you will see Nephthys with you've seen her around like the various coffins. She is the guide. She's guiding the ancestors to the other plane, right? And the temple of Isis, the inscription says, "I am Isis. I am she who is all that has been, is, and shall be." So she says, "No mortal has ever lifted my veil." This is Isis. Together, these four represent the sacred Ennead, right? Life, death, love, shadow. In alchemical terms, they are stages of inner purification. Yeah, inner purification. Now, get this though. According to Baba Kaba in his book, they also the Ennead, all nine of them represent molecules on a periodic table. So they were symbolic of a chemical, okay, of a chemical process of creation. So they just say, okay, this represents an atom. This represents moisture. This represents electricity. Each one of the Enneads represented some part of creation. Okay. But here's the thing: in earlier cycles of Kemetic spirituality, this journey was not linear but cyclical and balanced between male and female polarity. So Atum's creative act, it wasn't alone. Aset and Nephthys were twin aspects of the sacred wisdom. Nut and the sky Neteru was the star womb which all life descended. Okay. So by the time Sobekneferu came on the scene, the Heliopolitan priesthood had subtly reconfigured this cosmology, this idea. They reset that, and they elevated Ra Atum above all of them. They positioned Shu and Geb, the masculine principles, they put them higher than the feminine. So now this goes beyond myth. This goes into the inner alchemy, because each and every priest in the priesthood had to go through a process of change, right? So in esoteric terms, the Ennead was not just a family of natural gods or a theological structure. It is a template of the soul's descent into matter and its return to divine consciousness. It is a blueprint of the soul's alchemical evolution. The 9 stages, get this, the 9 stages mirror the 9 levels of creation. The 9 Neteru, 9 levels of creation, from unmanifest source to material density. Disclaimer, before we go further, I'm going to tell you this. I am not that knowledgeable in alchemy, okay? I'm not him. I'm not that person, okay? I am not. All I know is a little bit of African history, a little bit of Egyptian history, and that's it. All right, if you want to look into that, there's books out there. All right, let's go. So now, the soul. Remember, the soul begins as Atum, whole, pure, undifferentiated. Right, as it descends through duality, Shu and Tefanu, becomes entangled in the dynamics of form, Geb and Nut, right? And eventually experiences polarity, passion, loss, and birth, sadness, joy, Osiris, Set, and Nephthys. This descent is the soul's connection back to matter, but it is the initiate's journey, the goal for the initiate, the goal for those who are seeking in knowledge. Their goal is to reverse this process, not just linearly, but cyclically and spirally, right? Going back up. So in temples of Heliopolis, initiates were taught that these Neteru also existed within them. Okay. So through Heka, magic, or meditation and sacred geometry, they could awaken this divine knowledge, reunite Nut and Geb within, and become stars reborn through Nut's celestial womb. So the Ennead is a ladder. Each level, get this, the Ennead, if you write it down, the Ennead is a ladder. Each level is a phase of initiation. Yep. Each level is a phase of initiation. Okay. So we have Atun, the divine seed, Shu, the breath of life, Tefnut, the soul, which is fluid, Geb, the body, Nut, the spirit, Osiris, consciousness, Isis, memory and will, Set, trial and friction, Nephthys, the hidden key. Okay. So yeah, we may have to get into the book of Gates. I mean, we have to get into that, but 9 is the number of gestation. The human fetus takes 9 months. Okay. The soul too. It must pass through 9 gates before it can ascend, according to African custom, according to Egyptian custom, right? These correspond with the 9 pylons of the Duat in the book of Gates. A secret known to the temple initiates, seekers, and who never, these people never shared that information to those who were unprepared. Okay. So the 9, according to the book of Gates, the Amduat, the 9 are the beings of the house of Ra. Their names are hidden, their forms unknown. So we don't have time right now. We don't have time to break all this down. But let me know if you want me to discuss the book of Gates. Like and comment below book of Gates. Okay, don't comment below. But something changed. Okay, something changed. Solar politics and the hidden feminine in early cycles of Kemetic spirituality, balance between masculine and feminine polarities was essential. Atun's first act was neither male or female, but it was both connected as one. Nut and Isis were not passive figures, but they were active. And the priestess of Sheshat and Heteru was held once powerful initiatory roles. Okay, so I think I'll get back to that. So, but as dynastic politics took hold to society, especially by the 12th dynasty into the reign of Sobekneferu, Kemet's first verified queen, some subtle engineering occurred. The priesthood of Ra-Tun began to centralize their power through solar symbolism, and they tried to offset what Sobekneferu was trying to do. Ra-Tun is now supreme, and Shu and Geb, the masculine aspects, were elevated. So, trying to see how much time I got now. But dealing with solar politics and the hidden feminine, as dynastic politics took hold to society, especially the 12th dynasty and into the reign of Sobekneferu, Kemet's first verified queen, some re-engineering occurred. The priesthood of Ra began to centralize their power. The sun became the portal of renewal, became the emblem of singular authority. The Pharaoh, once the bridge between realms, is now portrayed as the sole keeper of Ma'at and divine order. And that was, to them, that was a no-no. Okay. And so Ra-Tun is now supreme. His light became the justification of absolute power. The Ennead, once a mystical cycle, was now flattened into some kind of hierarchy. Shu and Geb, the masculine aspects, were elevated as usurpers. Upholders of Ma'at. The divine feminine was increasingly ritualized, preserved, but not empowered. So they tolerated the feminine aspect of the Ennead, but they didn't give it any power. Okay. So it says the king is Ra, his word is law, all gods bow to him. This is new kingdom inscription. This is totally different than the equality that the Ennead originally had. This translation mirrored the rise of solar monotheism under Akhenaten and earlier tendencies in Heliopolis. The Ennead became solar formula used in code time, a royal and royal legitimacy and temple architecture rather than soul's liberation. The Ennead was originally for the initiate. Okay, it wasn't just something just to build temples with. Okay, so the shift elevated masculine deities such as Ra, Shu, and Geb, and while the divine feminine was veiled, hidden beneath the layers of myth and priestly interpretation, Aset was retained for her magical power, but her revolutionary aspect, the seeker of divine justice, the builder of thrones, the restorer of broken cosmic order, was subdued. So they liked the part about her having magic and everything, but they didn't like the part where she got active and involved. Yeah. So now we have Sobekneferu, whose name invokes both crocodile Sobek and the beauty of Neferu, reawaken the older traditions. Her patronage of temples linked to Sobek, Hathor, and Net suggests she drew upon pre-solar and stellar codes, cosmology, where the feminine was not peripheral but central. This was not her thought process. The way she was handling business, it wasn't a byproduct. The ancient ancestors was not a byproduct. They were in the forefront of her mind. So her reign was a metaphysical riddle, a woman enthroned in a solar hierarchy designed to suppress her very being. Mm-hmm. And I also believe she knew the stars. I believe she got to the point that she went from trying to put things on stone to put things in the celestial. She was starting to get to the point. In my opinion, I think she was getting beyond that. She was getting beyond wood and stone and everything. She was going somewhere else with it. Okay, like and subscribe, by the way. Now, so a queen pharaoh who ruled in the shadow dynastic collapsed. Her name invokes crocodile god Nisru Sobek, the primal waters, the Nisru, the divine feminine. Sobekneferu built temples to Sobek and restored shrines and to female deities like Hathor and Net. She rejected the strictly solar model and she went back to the pre-Enneadic cosmology, the ancient, the ways of the ancestors, pre-dynastic, okay, older and lunar and stellar traditions where the goddesses ruled the cycles. So in doing so, she became a symbolic issue. Okay, I told you she was different. A woman crowned by Ra's light, yet attuned to deeper powers. I think her powers was way more than they can control. Okay, so by the new kingdom, the Ennead became a solar algorithm used to legitimize kingly divinity, codify time like the temples and so on to regulate cosmic balance through the royal cult. But to the initiated, to the people who really understood, the Ennead remained a living map, a ninefold spiral of becoming something, of creation. Each name a resonance, a key to unlock the multidimensional self, because we're not just 3D, we're multidimensional, we're multifaceted. 9, as I said before, the number of gestation, the triple triad symbolize completion before rebirth. The Ennead, therefore, was not a conclusion, but a threshold, a beginning. To stand at the ninth gate was to face yourself, stripped of illusion, into your own reality. Only through balance and chaos, like Set with harmony, Osiris, intellect, Shu with intuition, with matter, with the spirit, could the initiate pass through beyond the sun into the starry halls of the Duat. Yep. So to understand the Ennead today, in our time, is to reclaim the original meaning. It's not just telling time, it's not just telling stories. It's not a doctrine of power, but a map. The Ennead is a map. As I said before, a lot of these physical chambers A lot of these halls, a lot of these chambers under the pyramids, under all these places, it was spiritual and symbolic, not actual. It was there. Yes, you saw it, but it was a spiritual idea. Okay. So it was a map. So get this. Each deity is a gate. Each Neteru, each ancestor was a gate, a vibrational current. We in the Kemetic science. Okay, here we go. Atune teaches solitude and wholeness. Shu teaches breath and balance. Tefnut teaches emotional wisdom. Geb teaches groundness. Nut teaches cosmic vision. Osiris teaches death and renewal. Isis teaches sacred memory. Set teaches teaches courage in chaos. Set teaches courage in chaos. Nephthys teaches surrender and silence, right? So together, all nine, together, they form the 9 spheres of the soul known in the temple tradition there's 9 parts of the soul according to Kemetic knowledge. There's 9 parts. The Ren, which is your name. The Ba, which is your personality. The Ka, which is the vital force. The Ab, or the heart. Shut, or the shadow. Sakim, which is the power. Ku, which is spirit. Sa'u, the immortal body. The Ankh, which is the luminous soul. That's why names are important. That's why they wrote their names everywhere. And that's why some of our ancestors would name their children after them, so that their name will always be called somewhere. Because when you call somebody's name, you're remembering them, right? And here it is, pyramid text number 571. Raise yourself, O Osiris. Take your throne. May your Ba live. Your Ka be mighty. Your Sha'u shine. Sa'u, by the way, is another word for star. Okay, your Sa'u shine in the sky like Ra. Okay, pyramid text 571. So the Ennead is not just static doctrine. It's a living spiral, right? And memory encoded in stars, temples, and DNA. Like we talked about the Jed before, to work with it undergoes transformation, not the belief, but a being, right? The ancient Egyptians didn't worship the Neteru. They became them. They represented them through ritual, initiation, sacred drama, inner work. They activated these energies within. So to walk or to talk, even talk about the Ennead like that, is to return to the source, to reclaim the gatekeeping, is to awaken the divine feminine, even fellas, that too, right? The hidden memory and the spiral path that leads back to new star embrace. The Ennead became a formula used not just to expand the soul's perception, but to validate a priestly hierarchy aligned with the king. And when the king was a woman, it invoked the other Neteru, because normally it's a guy. Now it's a sister. The older Neteru, the stellar tradition, Sobekneferu became symbolic contradiction in the system. Her very existence will raise the throne's contradiction. So, yeah, here it is. So we talked about the Esoteric Ennead, spiritual assassination. I still got a bonus. The road to destruction, fate of Sobekneferu, impending doom coming up. Now, spiritual disintegration. Yeah. Priest prophecies and the kingdom's collapse. Yeah. Sobekneferu became a major problem. She became a issue, right? So the priests of Ra saw Sobekneferu's rule as a aberration, one that needed to be corrected. The power of the Heliopolitan priesthood and their centrality in Egyptian theology was growing even stronger. The system rooted in the belief that the sun, Ra, was the supreme deity. He couldn't coexist with Sobekneferu's with her cosmic vision, which centered on the watery fertility of Sobek and the mystical hidden powers of these 7 stars. The Ennead, as we discussed, had been reinterpreted. They didn't like that old idea, so they got the new one, right? Atune's role as self-creator was now cast in the image of Ra and the solar force of Sobekneferu's adherence to the older, more fluid cosmology tied to Aset, Nephthys, and the stars was seen as a problem, as a threat. So, and the same goes when Joseph comes into play. So this the grain supplies were faltering, the crops were in jeopardy, and Joseph's influence over the Fayum had centralized control, pushing aside older traditions of divine abundance and connected to these new people. Yeah, the Heliopolitan priests, seeing an opportunity, began to assert their own influence over the king's court and subtly displacing Sobekneferu's traditional advisors, particularly to those loyal to the to the uh, to the Atum. Okay, so when Sobekneferu met Joseph, because I told you they did have an encounter. Okay, now the realization that Sobekneferu might have known Joseph, whether he be an important Hebrew who rose to become vizier of Egypt or just a composite character, expressing the greater achievements of Egypt's Western Asiatic population, is a possibility. Okay, now remember, Sobekneferu's the Pharaoh's daughter. So when Joseph was charged with undertaking these building achievements, when she was a part of those achievements, when he was a part of those building sites, Sobekneferu she was privy to it. She knew about it. She knew what was going on. So it is a possibility that they did have some interaction. Okay, according to the Coptic, you say you know that you know how dear such daughter of mine to me, and you see it's time that I would assign her someplace where she may be mistress and whereof the revenues may be sufficient to maintain her, and I do not find any lands beside my own which I can give her, unless it be in the Fayum area. So the king is saying, okay, if she's gonna be somewhere, she's gonna be in a place where she can thrive and grow. Okay. So I'm sure, according to historic custom, that Sobekneferu did meet Joseph, especially during the time where they was building those canals along in the Fayum. Now, road to destruction. Yeah, road to destruction. It's unfortunate situation where we have these different factions closing in on Sobekneferu because her father's gone. Amenemhat the fourth is gone. So to gain support for their demands, the priests of Heliopolis will perhaps have attempted to convince important and influential members of the royal court, as well as the country's native and foreign population, that this female pharaoh was taking the nation down a road of destruction. Remember, the Heliopolitan priests gained a lot of influence and power, and now because of Sobekneferu coming with the old ways and not really kind and not really happy about these foreigners being there, they're trying to sway the narrative that she's not good for Kemet, even though a lot of them people are foreigners, right? And so he said, according to Collins, they would have surely have highlighted the fact that everything had been fruitful during the reigns of her father and her brother, but all of a sudden there's a drought. As soon as she get in there, it's a drought. So you know people are gonna talk. You know people, they're gonna look, they're gonna say the sky's falling and everything. They're gonna say, yeah, it is, right? So this unfortunate situation would have been made worse by the fact that some of the excess flood waters had previously drowned parts of Lower Egypt were now being successfully diverted into the Fayum's Great Lake. So they think, okay, well, because it was flooding and all the water was everywhere. Now there's no water. Not knowing scientifically, they have taken care of those canals previously. But public opinion, it don't matter. They just know that it's not flooding anymore, and she's a problem. Remember, the king, be it the king in his or her capacity, is connected to Heru, okay, the divine rainmaker. And since she's here, the Nile has not been flooding, and we're starving, and we got these issues. So their absence, so the rain's absence at the time of inundation will be unquestionably blamed on her. So the Heliopolitan priests had something to say. They would seize that opportunity to say, "See, I told you, it's her fault." Yeah. So in addition to this, the Heliopolitan priests would have rightly spread rumors that Sobekneferu was responsible for the death of her brother, the king, which along with the Neteru denying Egypt a fruitful harvest, provided proof that she was not supposed to be king. So they're saying that she's responsible for her brother's death and or stepbrother and for the drought. Yeah. So the fate of Sobekneferu, what happened to her? Okay. It could be pointed out that during the Middle Kingdom or the Second Intermediate period, Barbara Bell wrote that in the time of trouble, both by poor floods and unusual uncertainty about the identity of the true Heru, or the true king, will be secretly murdered or expected to commit unalivement when his coronation was not followed in due season with floods adequate to avert scarcity. So, if correct, Collins believed that because the floods didn't happen, she was supposed to give herself that good old permanent relaxation. Okay. Before all this take place, though, there seems to be likelihood that Joseph, the vizier of Egypt, would have delayed Sobekneferu, would relay to Sobekneferu these accusations being leveled against her by the priesthood. That's what some people like to say. What this would have meant is doing whatever it took to get influential members of the royal court to forcibly remove her from the throne and, as consequence, suffer the same fate as her brother. So Joseph, like somebody, think Blue mentioned that somebody may have let her know, and according to some tradition, a lot of people would believe that Joseph told her that the priest was after her. So Joseph advised Sobekneferu of her impending fate. She believed what he said. So despite any antagonism that may have existed between Sobekneferu and the priesthood and Egypt, Western Asiatic population, is symbolized in Hebrew and Arab Islamic tradition by stories of Joseph. There does appear to have existed, Joseph may have existed, as we will see during this time frame, but her issue to them was who she was siding with. She was with the old ways. And so history tells us that Sobekneferu, this is impending doom, right? History tells us Sobekneferu and the nationalistic supporters of the incoming 13th dynasty were right to have been concerned about the long-term future of Egypt. For the rise of the Canaanite-led 14th dynasty unquestionably opened the door to a lot of problems. So Sobekneferu saw that coming. She saw those issues happening. You know, the prophecies of dreams and drought, alignments to the sky, the signs of impending doom were everywhere. The priests read the stars, and what they saw was troubling, and they whispered of a kingdom stretched thin, divine protection withdrawn from the land, and Ma'at was not in balance anymore. And so she, even though she was a queen in her own right, things was changing all around her, right? So divine judgments was happening. The sun was being eclipsed, and drought and famine, and all these things was happening, right? And they echoed through the halls of Egypt's temples and palaces. And so Sobekneferu eventually had to make some decisions. She had to make a choice. So we arrived to the end of Sobekneferu's reign, a queen who dared to embody the throne of Heru, a woman crowned by both divine lineage and sacred duty. Yet even this sacred can be silenced when power, fear, when it comes down to the fear of the unknown. The Heliopolitan priesthood, once keepers of divine order, became gatekeepers of memory, redefining the narrative, realigning the myths, and rewriting who had the right to rule. Their betrayal was not political, it was cosmic, it was spiritual. As we have seen, the erasure of Sobekneferu was not only a loss of a ruler, but the loss of balance in the sacred equation of Ma'at. The Ennead, with its 9 divine principles, reflected more than Neteru. It encoded the structure of the universe itself, and it was a map. So to disrupt it was to set chaos in motion. The arrival of Joseph and the Fayum, the shifting centers of power, and the growing rift between spiritual science and priestly control all marked the early tremors of an Egypt on the edge of collapse, an empire rich in mystery yet teetering on a spiritual fault line. So Sobekneferu's legacy challenges us to look deeper, go further, and not just in history, what history tells us, but what our heart will say. Okay. Her story echoes across time, reminding us that the fate of a nation is tied to how it honors the truth and who it chooses to forget. So, we just got to talk about priest prophecies and the last queen and the tragic fate of Sobekneferu. I told you we was going to do a little bit of Kemetic science and all the things. And so I'm very happy about it. We got a few more episodes of the Queens of the South. So if you are listening, we about to get into it. So next Sunday, we're going to talk about the vanishing queen, Nefertiti. So Mama Louise asked a question about Nefertiti, and she wanted us to go further with that. So we're going to talk about the vanishing queen, Nefertiti, and the battle for Egypt's soul. Okay, new series this fall, Ethiopia, the Ethiopia, the pillar of African civilizations, coming this fall. So I was originally gonna do it over the summer. So, but here's the books. Okay, the links in the description. Kemetic Spirituality. If you, because brother Ferguson, he asked about books. What are the next books we're gonna use? Here they are. The Ethiopians: A History by Richard Pankhurst. The link is in the description. And Kebra Nagast by E.A. Wallace Budge. We do have some other readings also. But that's for the fall. So what we're going to do this summer, we're going to talk about sacred bridges, the continuity of the Nile Valley spirituality. Yeah, we're going to connect Egypt, we're going to connect Sudan and Ethiopia together. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to tie them together, right? And we're going to start with Thrones of Fire, Temples of Light. Yeah, it's coming up this summer. And here are the books. Here are the books. Okay. Now, if you serious about this thing, okay, Africa, the Mother Western Civilization by Dr. Ben, and shout out to Tony Broder, Nile Valley Contribution to Civilization. We are doing that this summer. The link is in the description. And yeah, we're going to get into it. The people asked about Ethiopia. People liked our discussion on Ethiopia and Sudan. And so we're going to make that happen. All right. So, and a bonus, The African Origins of Civilization, Myth or Reality by Check Intergil. Yeah, you got to get that. Yeah, if we're going to engage in this conversation concerning Ethiopia and ancient Nubia, you got to get it. All right. And so this is our book. We almost done with it. The first female pharaoh, Sobekneferu, goddess of the 7 stars. The link is in the description. Check it out. And got to check roll. Shout out to the fam. One Voice Africa. Shout out to them. This is I think I'm sorry. I think it's Solo Mom. It's not Solomon. Solo Mom Food and Vlogs. Fabric 86. Officious Lucas. Rock Women Nation. What's going on? Grand Madam Tarot. G-Man 77. These guys have added value to the conversation or just subscribed recently. Queens of Kings Empress. Mo. Shout out to Brother Mo. I know he's out and about. Ancient Divinations. Adrian Rice. Library Without Borders. I haven't forgot about your question. I haven't forgot. Peggy Harrison. Miss Blue. Kiara Haynes. DFW African American Museum. Check it out. I intend on visiting with them really soon. So get ready for that. Shout out to Brother Elliott, Jay Williams, Anuti Davila, General Bunches, Kemetic Nation, Clark Nation Supreme, and Zep Tepe Slim. If you're still present and I didn't call your name, comment here. And shout out to Books a Million, Love Me Hair, You Nice. It's a Black Thing. Affiliate links are in the description. And enjoy. Okay, we just talked about chapters 22 through 25, Joseph and the Fayum, the rise of the Heliopolitan priest. We discussed the esoteric. We did a little Kemetic science, spiritual assassination. We did a bonus. Okay, we talked about alchemy. You missed it if you weren't paying attention. The fate of The fate of Sobekneferu, impending doom, recheck roll. Now, if you're still with me so far, okay, share it with somebody you think that might enjoy it, okay, and or share it with somebody on Facebook or Pinterest. Now, if you want to catch up with our Queens of the South series, I have the playlist ready. Or if you want to see who's King Tut's mama for real, I got the link for that. All right. All right. You listen to King Cam Ujumbe Podcast, Ujumbe Means Message. We talked about priests, prophecies, and the last queen, the tragic fate of Sobekneferu. And I'm glad that you guys are here. Shout out to the fam. I see Sully Zenith, what's going on? And Brother Ferguson, I see you, what's going on? And I will talk to you later.